to bring AI into the real world, whether that's through autonomous vehicles or humanoid robotics, the consequences of bad data become very severe. They become essentially a health and safety concern where a robot may not interact with something the right way, or a car may not understand a road sign and fly straight through a stop, or whatever the case may be. It's extremely important to ensure that high quality data. AI for me is kind of either a path of genuinely moving humanity forward and making everything amazing and like discovering new medicine, discovering longevity protocols, and basically building out the computer from Star Trek where you have like this companion that's able to analyze and fix all your issues. Or the other path is we're all doomed. And clearly, I don't want us to be going down the all doomed path.
Hey, Soheil here. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something, please consider to follow or subscribe or share this episode. That helps us out a lot. It helps us to reach more people and to spread quality education across the space about crypto and Web3. Also, if you're part of a crypto project or represent one and you would like to come on the show or do sponsoring, please get in touch with us. And lastly, everything we talk about today is for educational purposes and no financial advice. Enjoy the show.
All right, Rowan, it's lovely to have you on the TEACHMEDEFI podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So I looked into you, of course, and you are the former, as I understand it, you are the former director of on-chain business development at Coinbase. What is on-chain business development?
That's a great question. I think the short version here is that the business recognized they needed to do more in the on-chain world. And so creation of an on-chain team was a big part of that mission. And we did a bunch of things to help Coinbase be more crypto native, which sounds weird because Coinbase is obviously a giant publicly traded crypto company. However, for a little while, they kind of lost their way a little bit. They fell into the tech trap of hiring a ton of really talented project managers and engineers from traditional tech companies, from Instagram and Facebook and Google and Meta and all these companies. And while great, it meant that the percentage of crypto native talent within the company took a pretty harsh nosedive for a period. And so this was part of that kind of readjustment to help the company be more on-chain native, help them think about things from an on-chain perspective, and really participate more in the on-chain economy. And not just participate, but actually help to create. And obviously one of the outputs, I wasn't the only team. My team was part of this mission. But at the same time, there was an engineering kind of function doing exactly the same type of work. Like, how do we bring Coinbase's 1,000+ engineers into the on-chain world and have them building cool things more frequently? And the output of all of this mission was the coming together of a couple of teams, my team and Jesse's team, as well as Michael's team and a few others, to create Base, essentially giving Coinbase a home in the on-chain economy and a reason to deploy resources and deploy engineering talent, and a place to kind of put the flag in the sand and say, this is where we are, this is where we're building. But a little bit beyond that, we're going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but part of the main logic for deploying Base was to have a shared technology standard between as many builders as physically possible. One of the biggest kind of barriers to entry, if you think about complexity in DeFi land, for example, is everything is super fragmented, and you rely upon bridges, which are essentially just honeypots waiting to be exploited, to enable people to kind of merge these disparate economies together. And so Base was built on the OP stack, which is an open, available, non-licensed, fully open source standard. And the idea was throw Coinbase engineering power behind that, get as many other people as possible building on the same standard. And then if we deploy 10s, 20s of different chains, all using the OP stack, we no longer have this kind of problem of interoperability. We instead share a technical standard. And although that doesn't solve the problem, it makes the problem significantly easier to chew so that you can get real interoperability, enabling better user experiences across not just DeFi, but creators and every other type of builder.
That's really interesting because Base has been since then, I guess, doing quite well. And it's in my view, it's got a lot of mind share. It's a ecosystem that's growing. A lot of projects are building there. I believe you got there even without paying out any like financial incentives to projects to deploy on base. So clearly also the distribution you guys had with Coinbase is a great jump starter as well for that on-chain economy now. So yeah, tell me a bit, what was that like to launch this, and then how long were you still involved, and what was the journey like?
It was a ton of fun. There's no other way to put it. It was stressful for sure. We were trying to do something pretty risky for a large public company, like essentially partner with an open DAO, persuade the board and persuade the exec team that this was not commercial suicide. And then not just kind of get over the hump there, but like do the partnerships that can actually make it possible and feasible, and then build the strategy to make it successful, bring the right builders into the table. And so there was a lot of work to be done in a very short space of time. We were a little bit of an underdog within the Coinbase ecosystem at the start. I think that's very fair to say. We didn't have a ton of budget. We didn't have a ton of people. When it was launched, it was probably 20 people total, but the vast majority of those people were borrowed. And so core functionality and dedicated resource, like maybe 6 to 8 people, and resources in terms of cash compared to how Coinbase spends in other areas at that time, nearly nothing. And so you're right, we didn't pay builders to come and build. There's some infrastructure stuff that you have to pay for. You just don't get a choice. Node companies, for example, oracles are a really big expense when you're spinning up a new chain. But beyond that, everything was hugs and high fives and persuading people that joining a shared technical standard and helping us to deploy something new to give Coinbase engineers a home, but also to give Coinbase users a home on chain was a good way to spend some of their roadmap. So we managed to launch with about 100 apps and did a couple of cool campaigns like the Blue Dot campaign. I then continued to lead from a kind of business and ops perspective for, I don't know, 6 to 8 months post-launch, maybe a little bit longer, and then moved back to Europe for family reasons. And so I took a step back at that point, and the team's just absolutely crushed it. They've kind of proven the original thesis of this is viable, this is a real business and a real revenue stream. I think in round numbers, we 10x'd what we'd kind of promised to the exec team in terms of launch and revenue. And so at that point, they poured fuel on the fire. It was like, let's give this real resource, let's give it a real team. And Jesse has just gone on to absolutely crush in every possible way and is now a member of the exec team himself. So it's pretty epic to see what they're doing. My plan was to take some real time out, spend time with family, and basically do nothing for as long as I could. I'd been working nonstop since forever, basically, since like a really young age. And it was time for me to kind of focus on family rather than focusing on business or career or building. And that didn't work. I managed maybe 3 or 4 months, something like this, of focusing on family. And then now we're building Sapien. And I'm excited. I'm back in that kind of awesome place where there's a ton of ambiguity and there's a huge opportunity in front of us, and we need to execute to make the most of it.
Yeah, I guess crypto moves quickly in time, and crypto passes quickly in all phases. So also on a sabbatical, I suppose, that you had. So you got 4 months instead of a longer one.
I mean, for me, that's a luxury. That was a very long time.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's like that meme of McConaughey in Interstellar on that planet where time passes quickly elsewhere, and he's like, we can hodl here. So just a little thought on that. Okay, so Base kind of started like a scrappy startup. It sounds like it to me. I did not know that.
Super scrappy startup. Super low budget, tiny team, big idea, big hill to climb. And thankfully, I mean, tons of mistakes, don't get me wrong. I think from the outside, it's easy to say that the launch was pretty damn near perfect, but it definitely wasn't. We screwed up a ton of stuff, but we learned a ton on the way, and I think ultimately made it work. And that's all that really matters.
Right. So how did Sapien start? I mean, you're there, you're having your time with your family, and then what? You're like, a light bulb goes off, or does someone get in
Kind
touch
of.
with you?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've always been a bit of a sci-fi nerd. I think that's the first thing to say. I love anything that's in that realm, whether it's Star Trek or Dune or whatever. And I love technology. I always like to try and experiment or be involved in anything that's net new. Love playing with computers, love playing with everything else. That's how I got into mining. That's how I got into the on-chain world in the first place. And AI has been interesting to me for that reason. AI for me is kind of either a path of like genuinely moving humanity forward and making everything amazing and like discovering new medicine, discovering longevity protocols, and basically building out the computer from Star Trek, where you have like this companion that's able to analyze and fix all your issues. Or the other path is we're all doomed. And clearly I don't want us to be going down the all doomed path. And I am one person, and I don't think for any second that I can meaningfully move, but I'd love to try. And so a friend of mine reached out and said that they were kind of compiling a team to go after an idea. And as I heard him talk through the idea, it started to kind of immediately sound super interesting. And we kind of evolved it together. The original idea was relatively simplistic. It was Scale AI is out there sourcing and structuring data in a very archaic way, to be fair, using BPOs and large amounts of people in the developing world, paying them very modestly, and then selling that data, sanitizing it internally, structuring it internally, selling it to the highest bidder, essentially. And we kind of thought there was a better way to do that. Like there's a more open and equitable version of this business model that we thought could actually deliver higher quality data. And so we set out to prove that thesis. Ultimately, that led to 6 to 8 months of experimentation, tons of things that were nonsense and didn't work. And then ultimately creation of a protocol that we call proof of quality. And really this exists to answer kind of two key questions for anyone that's building an AI model. The first question is, who created the data? And just taking a step back for a second, I realize this is kind of DeFi focused as a podcast. AI really...
No, you're fine. You're fine. So it's just in the name. We cover all kinds of verticals. A lot AI recently.
Amazing. Okay, so I don't need to explain, but my analogy was just AI as a kid. The more useful information we give to it, the more useful it is to us. And the higher the quality information, the more kind of useful it can be. And so the two questions it's asking is like, who created the data and can the data be trusted? And we set about to answer those questions with a kind of set of incentives. And really what we ultimately ended up with is something that looks a lot like Ethereum's proof of stake, where you're aligning a kind of capital incentive along with a social incentive, a loose social incentive. And we kind of doubled down on this social piece of this. And so people are building reputation in the system over time. And that reputation is essentially collateral against the work they're completing. But they also need to have monetary collateral. And so they need to put their money where their mouth is against the quality of their work. And then if they do good work, much like in proof of stake, they get paid more than the hourly rate would normally be because their data is more valuable, it's higher quality, or at least that's the assumption we're looking to prove. And if they do bad work, if they cheat, if they're a bad actor, if they try and take the piss out of the system in some way, then we slash them. We don't just slash their reputation, but we actually take some tokens from them as well. And so that means that there's a real incentive to do good work and a real disincentive to not cheat and to not do bad work. But importantly, bringing some of these components on chain, we're definitely not a crew that thinks that everything belongs on chain. I think the vast majority of things in life shouldn't go anywhere near a blockchain. However, when you want real digital immutability, there's nothing really better. And so having that immutable record of this person created this data set, and we believe it to be true because of this set of checks that were done, or because of this person's credentials, or whatever the case may be, is super valuable, particularly when you're building a model that needs very high quality data. And if you imagine building a kind of AGI focused LLM, this is not work that we do, to be clear. The output of bad data can be things that are not true. It can be the model hallucinating and kind of making things up. But if you flip this over to something that's more serious, something like a health concern, you could steer somebody in completely the wrong direction. And then when you take that a step further and you bring AI into the real world, whether that's through autonomous vehicles or humanoid robotics, the consequences of bad data become very severe. They become kind of essentially a health and safety concern where a robot may not interact with something the right way, or a car may not understand a road sign and fly straight through a stop, or whatever the case may be. And so it's extremely important to ensure that high quality data. And the system that we've built, we're about 2 months in from launch. Company itself's nearly 2 years old. And so we've been doing the data collection, data structuring in a relatively traditional way for the first couple of years while we build the system. We've now had 2 months of production data, and we're starting to build a paper around our findings so that we can properly publish, we can get some independent review. But the early signs are exactly as we expected. More stake equals higher quality of data, and higher reputation users are creating higher quality data. So exactly what we wanted to prove is so far looking right. And now really where we're at is starting to scale this system and provide some real credibility, like I just said, with kind of bringing in third parties and bringing it to as many customers as we possibly can. We're already in a pretty epic position, and I'm super proud to be working with some of the companies that we are. Everything from Amazon Zoox building their robotaxis in Vegas, through to Toyota and GAC, Midjourney, Lenovo, United Nations. There's a large number of enterprise businesses that are building a huge array of different types of AI model and relying upon Sapien for a portion of their data needs. And it's great to start to be able to bring proof of quality to these customers and have them try it out themselves.
Okay. So, all right. So you're making sure that AI is trained on data that is high quality, which is obviously essential. Who are the assessors of the quality of the data?
Great question. And so the typical way this is done is farm out the work to as many low quality, low paid people as you possibly can. Low paid, not low quality, but the output is low quality data. And then have a centralized team that you trust to sanitize the data, structure it, and then ship it out. That for us is not a scalable model. We could try and do it, but it just didn't feel like the right path. And so instead, because we have people incentive aligned with good outcomes, we can actually move that work from a centralized facility into the entire network. And that way, the highest reputation users do the quality control, essentially checking the work of the lower reputation users. And that way, we're able to scale much quicker, and we're able to ensure quality through the exact same system. So proof of quality is essentially there from the second somebody signs up, they start building reputation, they start being paid in a mixture of stable coins. Primarily, they're paid in stable coins. We think that's really important, but they're paid a portion of their earnings in Sapien so they can build that collateral over time. That's really important to prevent having a huge commercial barrier to entry. We want everybody to be able to participate. And then over time, as they build up the collateral and they build up reputation, we can trust them more and more. We have a record of how well they've worked in the past. And ultimately, when they reach kind of near the end of this journey, we can trust them to do the quality control. And so we build up this network of QC-ready people all around the world in tons of different skill sets. Some of them are focused exclusively on doing 3D, 4D annotation for autonomous vehicles and robotics. Others are focused exclusively on translation work or bounding box work for different images. It could be a number of different things.
Okay. Because as you were speaking, I was wondering about like an approach as in perhaps like you have like a consensus-based assessment, like perhaps 3 people which are randomly selected could assess an output. And if they all agree, let's say if they all agree that it's bad, they get paid out a share of that slash of the initial data processor. Did you at any stage explore this sort of approach as well?
We are 2 months in. So that's exactly where we're going. Not necessarily with the economics. That's a consideration, and we're gonna pull every variable lever we can. But where we are now is trying to find the right balance of consensus. Like, what is enough in terms of verifying a piece of data before it's shipped? We still have a centralized QC function. And so we still have a large number of people, Sapien people, that are like the last line of defense before data is shipped to a customer. And we do this because it's critically important that that data is solid and reliable and high quality. However, the plan over time is to migrate this function entirely to the community. And so we're not there yet. We have community members doing QC, a decent number of them, but we're not ready to fully hand the reins over. And we need to come up with the right incentive model to bring that work to them. And so exactly what you said is one of the considerations. But I think the most important part beyond the economics, because they get paid irrespective of the economics, the most important part is to ensure that we have the right consensus numbers, i.e., what is enough in terms of checks before we ship. And it's exactly the same type of work that's been done in the on-chain world many times. How many confirmations are enough before you can call a transaction final? We're going through exactly the same type of work. And thankfully, we've all spent a decade-ish in the crypto world. And so we have that experience of kind of building in that way to bring to this same problem. And we're seeing it a little bit differently to some other AI companies are as a result.
That's a fun problem to solve. That sounds like a good next chapter after the base launch. So what kinds of data is it? Because before we started recording, you said the data labeling is dead, at least like in the old form of it. So I'm just curious to hear what kinds of data we're talking about, especially as you're working with all these different companies who I assume maybe they have these like, I don't know, not niche, but like idiosyncratic data sets that they need for their specific business or the AI solution they want to use. So just wondering, take me through it.
This is one of the hardest parts of the problem for every single part of our business. And that is that every single company is building something of their own. Nobody is sharing data between themselves. Nobody is sharing a technical standard, file formats, structuring. Everything is completely unique for each customer. And so part of the mission for another time, a problem for the future, is how do we help standardize and how do we help connect the dots to really bring these things together, much like we did with Base of trying to create a shared technical standard. But for now, we have spent the first couple of years very transparently being a scrappy startup in shotgun mode, firing everything against the wall and trying to figure out like, where are we strong? Where are we able to deliver high quality data? What does our community enjoy doing the best? And the output of that has been that we're going to double down on what we believe to be the most sustainable source of demand going forward. And that's 3D, 4D data sets. And the second part that we're going to double down on is data collection. And so your typical data labeling business, even just a year ago, would have been doing things like draw a box around the AirPods. Like this type of work is now easily handled by computer vision. So there's no value in this type of work at all. And then the next kind of part of our logic is that where we are today as an industry, probably the highest demand data type is expertise. It's not what's happening around you. It's give me a board certified oncologist to help me understand this radiography image. But don't just tell them to draw a box around something suspicious. Get them to talk me through their kind of chain of thought, the reasoning behind why this is suspicious, so my model can properly learn how to diagnose. And then times that by 50,000 because I need lots of data. And so bringing expertise into the AI world is a big part of where we are today. And we could double down there. Like we have a decent sized network. There's a couple of million people in the network. And although that's not enough to satisfy really niche, obscure expertise needs, it's kind of the start of getting over the cold start problem. However, if we take a step back, AI is very clearly accelerating at an insane pace and learning at an insane pace. And every time a new model comes out, it's blowing through prior benchmarks. and absorbing information at an incredible rate. And I think our thesis is that AI is learning faster than humanity is creating net new knowledge. And so, therefore, that knowledge collection, that expertise piece, is very likely to be finite. And so, we're not really doubling down there. We can do some work there. We've done a ton of work in the medical field and for engineering, things like this. However, where we really see the long-term value, as I said a minute ago, is where AI intersects with the real world, where a model has to figure out how to walk around on a street or how to drive around through roadworks or whatever the case may be. All of these types of interactions in the real world will have an element of randomness. And that element of randomness will always require humans to come in and say, what you're looking at is X. And the way to safely navigate that is Y, Z, and A. And so we are building tooling and modifying some of our systems to be better suited to 3D, 4D data, and actively deploying resources and capital to really go after that part of the market, whether it be autonomous vehicles, robotics, manufacturing, or even air travel, drones, deliveries, things like this. All of those things require kind of 3D, 4D, either video or LiDAR type annotation, as well as collection. And so that's really where we're focusing. And then data collection, as I said, it's something that we're doing. It's something that I think is really useful for the community. We're able to pay people all over the world to provide knowledge. And that's actually a pretty epic thing to be involved with. We work with the World Food Programme, for example, United Nations, and we have people in Africa who have pretty shitty economic opportunities for a variety of reasons that I won't get into. But ultimately, rather than earning 30, 40, 50 cents an hour doing whatever it is they would be doing otherwise, we can pay anyone anywhere $3, $4, $5, $6, $10 an hour, depending upon the type of knowledge they're creating, depending upon the type of information they're collecting. And that's a game changer. It's a game changer for thousands of people. And so pretty awesome.
Okay. As you're talking about this, I'm thinking of Tesla, obviously. So what kind of apparently they're the most advanced on like 3D AI models, right? So what kind of data are they using? Like where is that collected and how is it assessed or interpreted for them to use it?
So Scale AI were essentially built on the back of Tesla's data needs. That's how Scale AI got to scale. However, Tesla were smart. They realized that this was really important to their business and a kind of pass or fail type thing. And so they brought it in-house and they've done their own data primarily, to the best of my knowledge, ever since. There's a number of different companies trying to catch up to where they are with autonomous vehicles. They do things a little bit differently. Like they do have sensor data, but they're doing, from what I can see, more and more camera style work, where it's video rather than full sensor information. However, we're not involved. So it's like super hard for me to comment what they're doing, how they're doing it. They're doing it internally. Seemingly, they're doing a good job because they're building cars that are able to drive around pretty well. I think a good comparison here, and I don't want to throw shade at any companies, I think everybody building in this space is epic and they're building the future. But Waymo, for example, have deployed their cars in SF, and they've been driving around SF for a good amount of time, learning the streets, receiving data feedback from people, helping to hone and make them safer, make them fail safe, importantly, so they don't fail in a crazy way. And they tried to bring their cars from SF to, I'm just going to pick a city, it's going to be wrong, San Diego. I don't know what city they did next. And it was a complete flop. The cars wouldn't function. They'd learned on a data set in San Francisco, and they couldn't convert that knowledge to something that was relevant for another city. And so seeing a Tesla drive literally across the entire country is super impressive. It's not an easy problem to solve, and they seem to be on the right track. Obviously, they've had a few bumps along the way, and I'm not going to sit and say they're epic. There's safety concerns and a variety of other things. But from a problem standpoint, they've done a very good job.
So what's an example for the data that gets collected here? Like what is it? Like recording a video or like And then how is it labeled? Can you give an example just so it's a bit more tangible?
Yeah, so let's look at LiDAR data. I think that's one of the most common in the autonomous vehicle sector. Cars are driving millions of miles. They have LiDAR scanners and sensors. They're picking up tons of information. And whenever they encounter a scenario that they're unfamiliar with, they have data sent back to base. That data is farmed out to people, to humans, with the right expertise or the right knowledge to understand what it is that the vehicle is looking at, what the scenario that the vehicle is in, and how that vehicle should behave. And so it could be identifying roadworks, it could be identifying a new road layout, it could be identifying something that crossed the road, an animal, a car, whatever, but helping the vehicle to better understand where it is in space and time and how it should interact with those things around it. And it's done by literally helping to label and annotate the information on screen. And then that's fed back in. It's fed through quality control. And we're not talking about like piecemeal information going in. We're talking about huge amounts of data that are farmed out at once, all reviewed and sanitized, and then put back into the model, and then run on inference and training to help that model better understand how it should act if it sees something similar in future. So that's one example.
Right. But that sounds to me like quite advanced, right? Like it sounds to me like a company would be doing that. Like, can individuals do that? Or like the people who contribute to Sapien, for example?
Yeah, this is actually a complete happy coincidence, but if we take a normal person off the street and we show them LiDAR data in 3D, and we have them try and figure out what's going on, try and figure out even just how to interact with the data set, they're going to be pretty lost. However, in the early phase of development for Sapien, we had an idea of trying to somewhat gamify the tasking interface to make it more fun, more engaging, try and have people kind of come in and spend more time in the app. And clearly not building a game. And we did a pretty shitty job of gamifying, to be honest. Like, I think we'd be lying if we said we made it fun. We might have made it like 0.1% more fun, but we did partner with a couple of large gaming companies. We partnered with YGG and Animoca, and we brought a bunch of people from the on-chain and the off-chain worlds that were interested in gaming, gamers. And it just so happens that this subset of the public are actually really good at understanding a 3D dataset, manipulating a 3D dataset, and providing simple annotation expertise that most people have if they can understand what they're looking at to enable this type of work. And so you're right, not everybody can do it. And quality control has been a giant pain in the ass on this specific type of data. And that's a big part of why we built proof of quality, to get away from the centralized QC that's very resource intensive, and to kind of be able to hone in on who are the right people to do the work based upon their prior reputation or their skills or even their credentials. Like, are they someone that has the right expertise for this particular piece of work? And those things have enabled us to do this work, not just in a go and find people with the right experience, but also pull people from the community that are just inherently good and have them do it.
Okay. And can you collect the LiDAR data from individuals, or do you have like partnerships with car manufacturers or something?
So it's actually the companies themselves that send us the data. And so, for example, rather than talking about a customer and getting into how they're working, which I can't really do, let's just use Tesla. To be very clear, we do not work with Tesla. But the model here is that a company like Tesla sends us their data. We then parse that out to the people that we believe are best suited to doing the work. We get the work done, quality controlled, and then we deliver it back to them. So we don't get involved in training or inference or anything like that. We're purely in the structuring and annotation of the data before it ships back. Where we're looking in terms of forward looking is how can we meaningfully contribute to collection? Because that's a really big problem, specifically for robotics. And there's a number of things that we can do there. And we're going to try out a couple of new tasks that you'll see drop in the relatively near term. I think pretty much anyone that has an iPhone, regardless of which model, has a LiDAR scanner essentially in their pocket. And so we're going to try and collect a bunch of LiDAR data by incentivizing people to just walk around and capture that information. There's a few kind of considerations that we need to get right before we launch a task like this. Privacy and safety concerns, number one. And once we have them nailed, we're going to try it. We're going to see if it works. We're going to collect a bunch of data. We're going to see if we can structure and annotate it and make it useful. And then we're going to see if we can market that. And so this is us taking a little bit of a bet. We do this occasionally. Rather than doing a reactive piece of work for a customer, we can do something proactive where we think that a data set would be useful. And so we'll go and create that data set with the community. But as of today, we don't do any collection at all.
Okay. Sorry, you don't do any from the community. You don't do any collection.
Well, we don't do collection for 3D, 4D data. We do collection for knowledge and different types of information, but we haven't done any 3D, 4D data collection yet.
Right. And perhaps it would be interesting to also understand kind of like the value flow, so or the economic model. So let's say you're working with this car brand, and I assume they would be paying you to do this work, this data structuring or labeling work. Then you have all these individual contributors who do that. So that's value. I assume you paid in fiat then on the client side. So do you bring that on chain? Do you distribute that to some extent to these contributors? What does that look like?
Yeah, we pay 80% in stablecoins to people that are doing the work. We price the work usually in collaboration with the customer. And so they essentially set the market rate. We don't really get involved there. End state here is Sapien being more of a marketplace rather than a service business. And so we're not in the game of setting pricing. We're essentially connecting supply and demand. And the way it works today is we mark up what we expect cost to be if we're doing something kind of proactive, or if we're doing something reactive, we run with kind of pricing from the customer, and then we pay to the users in stablecoins with a small amount of Sapien tokens, and that gives them some ownership in the network over time. Importantly, it gives them collateral they can use against future work and helps them kind of become a more advanced user within the ecosystem, which means greater economic opportunities, ability to do QC, things like this. But the short answer is that where we are now, there's still a bit of manual intervention, and where we want to be, which we're probably about 6 months out from, is full open marketplace where we take a 30% cut of all activity, irrespective of value or type. And that's really how Sapien is involved. Beyond that, 70% of the economics is between supply and demand.
Okay. What about the Sapien token? Do you pay out like protocol rewards to some extent as well, as added benefits, or what is there other utility?
It's very difficult for us, for the foundation at least, not for us, to meaningfully move revenue on chain. The foundation would love to make that happen. And so the regulatory compliant way is to spin up a DAO, which is in progress. That's going to happen Q1-ish next year. And the DAO will receive a percentage of operating revenue from customers. And then it'll be up to the DAO to vote to decide how to allocate those resources. One of the ways they can allocate those resources is by sending that revenue to token holders. Or they could purchase tokens on the open market, and then they could decide to keep those tokens as a treasury, or they could decide to burn those tokens. And so there's a number of different ways to accrue value to the token in a compliant way. However, we need to do that right. And so it's not something that can happen immediately. But yeah, the aim is end state economics. Sapien is matching supply and demand, taking a 30% cut for doing so, and a percentage of that revenue goes to a DAO to be allocated however they see fit. And then the individuals doing the work are paid properly for doing the work.
Right, correct. But are there also any sort of inflation payout rewards, like per epoch or something?
No, we're not. We are a fixed supply of 1 billion tokens. There is no inflation. Actually, that's not true to say. There is inflation in terms of tokens are locked currently and will emit over time. So that is inflation. However, there's no inflation on the total number of tokens. It will always be 1 billion tokens. And so rewards are from existing buckets of tokens.
Right. But is there a bucket for stakers, for example, because you're staking?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the staking rewards are actually less about lock your tokens up to do some work. The work is the reward for locking your tokens up in that fashion. However, it's important for us to have good liquidity on chain. And so the intention is to use staking rewards to reward people that are providing liquidity on chain. And this is extra important for us because we have a very globally distributed user base just by nature of the type of work that we're doing. And many of these regions aren't supported by good fiat on and off ramps. They're supported by like mediocre at best, and in some cases are not supported at all. And so these people need to have good access to on-chain trading so they can go from Sapien to a stablecoin, hopefully a stablecoin in their fiat, and then use their stablecoin to get back out into what they need for their daily lives. And so staking rewards will deploy. They're not going to deploy yet. We're still in the midst of an airdrop. The airdrop comes to an end at the end of the 3rd month post-launch, so end of this month. And then from there, we'll start deploying staking incentives for LPs. And the main incentive in the system is going to be people being paid for work up until DAO is live, in which case one potential outcome is that token holders receive some revenue.
Okay, so it's not the staking of the workers that receive the staking rewards. It's the if you LP to a DEX. Did I understand this correctly?
Exactly. So there's different incentives for different types of people. Not everybody is going to want to do hourly work for $5 an hour, for example. Actually, the current average wage on our platform so far is just a hair under $10 an hour, which is much higher than we expected, but really cool to see. Not everybody in the world wants to do work for $10 an hour. And so we need to have a way that people that don't want to do work can be involved in the ecosystem. And that way needs to be kind of beneficial to everybody else in the ecosystem. And so having people come in, deploy some liquidity, earn trading fees for doing so, and then have us boost the yield to make that worth their time, worth their effort, worth their capital is super important. And that helps everybody because it means there's better liquidity to enter and to exit.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Maybe we zoom out a bit and I mean, how do you feel about there's all these different facets to AI and to decentralized AI, I guess. How do you feel about the decentralized AI space? Do you also get involved with other crypto projects in this space, or is it that you're focusing on the training part, basically?
We have friends building some cool things kind of in the periphery. Not something that we're actively engaged with. Like we're chewing a pretty big problem already. We need to focus in our own lane. I think if you'd asked me what I think of decentralized AI even 6 months ago, I probably would have given you a pretty bearish answer. Tons of garbage, loads of grifty nonsense, people really not creating anything, just kind of linking an existing LLM to Twitter, for example, and like, yay, now we have shit posts created by AI. If there's one thing the world needs less of, it's probably that. However, we're starting to see some really cool stuff. We're starting to see people deploy AI to solve complexities in the on-chain space, for example. If you're a new user and you're trying to spin up a wallet and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I bridge tokens from A to B, or how do I flip my USDC for whatever random shitcoin that I'm looking for, it's really hard. And it's a massive technical barrier to entry. And so seeing companies like Wayfinder and Mamo and a bunch of others really tackle that by just deploying AI. And in that way, I can just in plain text say, hey, go and buy some USDC and then bridge it to base and then use it to buy Mamo. Like, those things are super cool, super useful. We're also starting to see some cool primitives around kind of marketplaces. Sahara is a good example here. Like, they're doing some cool stuff, enabling really any component that's required for building out a model to be bought and sold, and using kind of on-chain mechanics to make that a little bit simpler, a little bit easier. But broadly speaking, I think we've still got a ton of noise and not really a huge amount of cool, innovative things. But maybe I'm missing. Maybe I'm missing some more recent context. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe your context window is too small.
It could be. It could be. I think I'm still in the world of pretty bearish overall.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah, maybe to wrap this up, where would you like to see Sapien perhaps in a year, and like the whole training space perhaps?
It's useless me coming on and chatting to people like you and your audience and saying Sapien's proof of quality is a game changer and it works and everyone's going to love it, they're going to be using it. It's completely meaningless. We need to prove it. We need to do it. We need real independent credibility. And so where I want to see us in 6 months is we've done that work. We've had whatever academic institution come in and check what we've created. We've proven it with customers. We have case studies. And we're able to stand up and credibly say, yeah, we genuinely have created something useful that helps improve the way that AI models are made. And the output is AI is now safer, smarter, whatever each company is looking to achieve. So for me, this next 6 months is all about building some credibility.
Awesome. Well, best of luck with that. I hope this whole conversation helped as well for people to understand how you are building that credibility by building real utility there. So yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. Been fun.